Welcome in to the 247 Sports YouTube page. I'm Emily Proud, and we are getting to that point in the season where the word chaos just does not do it justice. What we can accurately say is that we're starting to get a better picture of what the playoff might look like, and it sure seems like there will be some purple in the Final Four. Let's bring in Chris Hummer for some Week 11 winners and losers. Chris, TCU taking down Texas Saturday night. The way they won this game, though, was different than what we're used to seeing. They did it with defense, and they didn't have to come from behind. How does that kind of win change your view of this team as a playoff contender?
I was there in Austin, and it was a really weird game. Not only was Gary Patterson on the opposite sideline from TCU, which was just odd on its own to see that happen after Gary was the head coach of TCU for so long, but TCU and Texas had the fewest yards and a half of any Big 12 game since 2009. These are two top 20 defenses coming into the week, and they didn't look like it in the first half, but credit to TCU because that's something the College Football Playoff Committee has dinged them on this year. And TCU responded in a huge way. This has been a second half team all year. I think they're outscoring opponents in the second half by 117 to 68 the last 6 games. So while the conversation around TCU has consistently been this team only wins close and they only find ways to eke out wins, I would submit that we should look at them differently. This is a team built to win games in the second half and to wear on opponents. We saw that happen against Texas, and we've seen TCU do that to everybody they've played this season.
Just get better as the game goes along. Well, we can put the playoff talk on pause with this next winner, but it's yet another reminder that the playoffs are not the end-all be-all. How about the Commodores? Vanderbilt gets its first SEC win since 2019. That means it's Clark Lea's first and the first in a post-pandemic world. It's been a while. You wrote that this victory represents progress and resilience. How?
When I went to Vanderbilt earlier this summer, actually, I talked with Clark Lee in his office for a little bit, and he had a quote that really stuck with me. He said Vanderbilt, when they took over, was psychologically traumatized. The team could not figure out a way to get out of its own way. Clark Lee fought all last season to establish that culture and change that for Vanderbilt. And I think we saw a representation of that for Vanderbilt over the weekend. It hasn't been an easy week for Vanderbilt. Defensive backs coach Dan Jackson got in trouble and got taken off the field due to a post he made about Kanye West. They lost starting quarterback. They lost their starting quarterback to injury, AJ Swan, the true freshman who was the hope for the future. And this week, with a backup quarterback at Kentucky against a ranked team, this Vanderbilt team came from behind and won. This team no longer seems psychologically traumatized. This rebuild project is way off the ground, and I think the future is very bright in Nashville based on what Clark Lee and his staff are doing.
Yeah, Lee getting pretty emotional after that win, coming the day after his birthday, too. So a nice little delayed birthday present. Well, the ACC championship game is officially set. We've got Clemson squaring off against North Carolina. The Tar Heels win the Coastal after a tight victory over Wake Forest. Drake May continuing his dominance, and yet 6 of UNC's 9 wins were one-score games. Chris, where would this team be if May wasn't playing like a Heisman contender?
I think you could argue, maybe outside of Hendon Hooker, Drake May's playing the best quarterback in the country right now in terms of his production. I think I'd still might take Bryce Young over him. I still might take CJ Stroud. And I say might because Drake May is playing that well. Those in the building believe Drake is super coachable, and we've seen that, but he's been just flawless since October 8th. He hasn't thrown an interception in that stretch. He's had 15 touchdowns while completing 70.4% of his passes. He threw for 448 yards against Wake Forest in a game where North Carolina needed every single yard. North Carolina's defense isn't great. It ranks 114th nationally in yards allowed per play. This UNC team needs Drake May to carry it, and he's been consistently up to the task. I think we're looking at a Heisman finalist. I think we're looking at a potential number 1 overall pick in 2024 in the NFL draft. And I think we're looking at one of the very, very short list of best quarterbacks in the country that Drake May is certainly a part of it. And UNC owes almost all of its success this year to the play of Drake May.
Yeah, that ACC championship game against Clemson would be a great time to have a Heisman moment. Well, we started this segment highlighting a team who helped its playoff chances, but now to the other side of things. Oregon likely eliminating itself from the playoff with a loss to Washington. That hurts. So does losing the border war, but the Ducks can still play for a Pac-12 championship. What about this loss, Chris, concerns you about their ability to finish strong down the stretch?
Well, I think this loss exposed something that's been a problem for Oregon all year. They're 88th nationally in yards allowed per play, and I think that's going to drop considerably after this weekend. Like, this is a defense that's been bad all season. I understand why people talked about Oregon the way they had. They were scoring over 40 points per game. Bo Nix has and played like a Heisman Trophy finalist contender. So they've been excellent in that regard, but Oregon's defense has been getting exposed all season, and this is the best offense that Oregon's played in a long time against Washington. And in the second half, we saw it fall apart. Oregon only got one stop in the second half, and it was because of a really bad Michael Penix interception on the goal line. Other than that, Washington scored every time it touched the football in the second half. Oregon couldn't hold its lead, and you're asking the offense to do too much week to week when it has to be nearly perfect to win every game. And honestly, this is a really familiar thing for Oregon, not necessarily the defensive struggles, but this is the third time in 5 years Oregon entered November with a legitimate chance to make the college football playoff, only for it to lose a regular season game that you didn't expect it to. So this is a pretty tough blow for a program. Obviously, Dan Lanning still has time to rally. A Pac-12 championship would be a great accomplishment in year one, but losing this game really does sting when you consider everything that was on the line for the Ducks.
Yeah, the Ducks may be the losers in this one, but man, the viewers are the winners. That was a spectacular game. Two great offenses squaring off against each other. Well, meanwhile, the Big Ten West just got a whole lot more interesting. Illinois falling to Purdue Saturday means now over half of the division has the same 4-3 conference record. As 4 teams now battle for the division, how do you feel about the Illini's chances to still come out on top?
Not great. Illinois has Michigan next week. They go on the road to play that game. That's likely a loss. And this was a team just a couple weeks ago that had firm control over the Big Ten West. Now, as you said, Purdue, Iowa, and Minnesota are all tied at top at 4-3, and Wisconsin's not too far behind at 3-4. Personally, as somebody who loves chaos, I really enjoyed the Big Ten West. Like, you never know what's going to happen week to week. I think all the teams are very similar. But if you're Illinois, like in Brett Bielema, this is a really disappointing loss. You had every chance to advance to the Big Ten championship game if you took care of business at home, and they've lost back-to-back home games. And to make matters worse, their star running back, Chase Brown, the nation's leading rusher, exited the game with less than a minute left with a leg injury. He wasn't able to put weight on his leg at all, and the injury looked pretty serious. So they could be without Brown for the rest of the season as well. So this was a really tough blow for Illinois all around.
Yeah, major bummer for the Illini. Meanwhile, the nature of the sport means that a lot of attention is going to automatically go on the quarterback, and we were all kind of wondering what the heck happened to Brennan Armstrong. The guy we watched last year led the Power 5 in passing yards per game, and now he has more interceptions than touchdowns, but you say that he's not the issue with the Cavs, so what is?
I think Brennan Armstrong is emblematic of what's wrong with the Cavs, and it's really interesting. Bronco Mendenhall was the head of a team that consistently outperformed expectations. Virginia was not the most talented team in the ACC, yet Bronco Mendenhall instilled a culture that was able to overcome that. They had a really fun offensive system. They were a top 5 offense nationally. And right now, under Tony Elliott, they just look a mess. Like, frankly, like Brennan Armstrong's clearly regressed, and Tony Elliott's recent results coaching quarterbacks have not been particularly positive since Trevor Lawrence went to the NFL. Obviously had a really rough year with DJ Uiagalelei last year, and Brennan Armstrong's regressed considerably. But this team has just not been able to overcome its issues. They've been injured, woefully underwhelming coaching results. I think we're going to see a really big transfer portal exodus out of Virginia again, potentially this offseason. Elliott wasn't really able to keep the roster together last offseason when a lot of players went in the portal. Elliott didn't take over a broken culture, but right now it feels like Virginia's culture is a little broken.
All right, check out Chris's college football overtime piece on 247sports.com. Also has another story, a deeper dive into TCU. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the 247 Sports YouTube page for all things college football all season long.